They thought I was bluffing. They thought I'd fold like I always had when they pushed hard enough. They were about to find out I'd been planning this for longer than they knew. My name's Frank Donovan. I built everything I have, every brick, every acre, every dollar, with my own hands, and the years they stole from my back. I raised my kids in comfort, maybe too much comfort. I wanted them to have what I never did. Turns out, I gave them something worse, the belief that they didn't need to earn anything. It started small. Requests for help that turned into demands. A temporary loan that never came back. Then, the outright assumption that my wallet was a bottomless pit. I ignored the signs for too long, convincing myself they'd grow out of it. They didn't. They got sharper, greedier. So I wrote my will. But I didn't just write it, I designed it like a test. The kind they couldn't cheat on. Every asset, every share, every property, locked behind a single condition. They'd only inherit after working 1 full year in a charitable organization. No access to my accounts. No backdoor handouts. 1 year of sweat and humility before they touched a cent. I didn't expect applause. I expected silence. And I got it, the quiet, simmering kind, heavy as wet concrete. A week later, the phone calls started. First polite, then sharp, then laced with the kind of anger only entitlement can produce. I didn't answer most of them. When I did, it was to repeat the same line. The terms are final. Apparently, final didn't sit well. The next thing I knew, I was being served. Court papers, neat and heavy in a cream envelope, with my own last name printed on them like a bad joke. They were challenging the will before I was even gone. The ink wasn't dry, and they were already sharpening their knives. The morning of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse alone. No lawyer at my side, I didn't need one yet. Let them think I was unprepared. The hallways smelled of stale coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. My footsteps echoed in the near-empty corridor, the sound tight and deliberate. They were already there. My son, Daniel, in a tailored suit I knew he hadn't paid for. My daughter, Melissa, scrolling on her phone like she was waiting for a latte instead of a judge. They didn't look at me, not directly. Just quick glances, measuring, calculating. I'd seen that look before in boardrooms, in business deals, and now on the faces of my own blood. When the judge entered, the room went quiet. My kid's lawyer, some young, slick type with a tie too shiny to trust, stood up and started talking about unreasonable conditions and emotional hardship. He painted me as a man who'd lost touch with reality, imposing punitive clauses on his innocent children. I almost laughed. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, let the silence hang. "Your Honor," I said, my voice even, "there's no hardship here. There's an opportunity. A year of work for people who have nothing. And if my children find that too much to ask, then they've already answered the question this was meant to ask." The lawyer smirked, thinking I'd walked into his trap. "So you admit the assets are currently under your name and subject to division under—" "No," I cut in. "They're not." I reached into my briefcase and placed a stack of documents on the table. Everything, the properties, the accounts, the investments, has already been transferred into an irrevocable trust. The terms of that trust match the will exactly. Until they meet them, they get nothing. The air in the room shifted. Daniel's jaw tightened. Melissa's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Their lawyer shuffled his papers like maybe he'd picked the wrong fight. I didn't gloat. Not yet. I just looked at my kids, really looked at them, and saw the moment they realized they'd have to choose between swallowing their pride or starving their lifestyle. The judge cleared his throat, glancing between us. "In that case, there's nothing for this court to decide today." I picked up my documents, slid them back into my case, and walked out. My pulse was steady, my steps slow. I didn't need to turn around to know they were watching me go. They thought the trust was the end of the story. It was just the opening move. The courthouse doors swung shut behind me, and the cold March air slapped me in the face. It felt good, sharp, clean. Inside, they were probably already whispering, plotting the next angle. My kids never liked losing, and they'd just been told, in public, that they'd get nothing without playing by my rules. I didn't go home. Not yet. I took a slow walk through downtown Hartford, watching office workers rush between meetings, coffee cups clutched like life preservers. That used to be me hustling, grinding, thinking about the next deal before the last one closed. I'd earned the right to slow down. My kids? They'd never even started the race. By the time I got home, the first messages were waiting. Daniel's voice, tight and clipped, "This isn't over." Melissa's text, all caps, "You're ruining our lives." I almost replied with a photo of my coffee mug that says "Not my problem" in bold letters. Almost. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and opened my notebook. Not the financial one, the other one. The one I'd started months ago, when I first saw where this was heading. It wasn't just a trust I'd built. It was a system. I knew my kids well enough to predict their moves. They'd try every shortcut, every loophole. They'd claim they'd volunteered when all they'd done was donate money. They'd pull strings, get cushy positions where they could sit in an air-conditioned office and call it charity work. Not on my watch. So I made calls. Real calls. To people I trusted, the director of a battered women's shelter in Boston, the coordinator of a disaster relief team in Louisiana, a church-run food bank in Cleveland. Places where work meant sweat and no one cared who your father was. Each one agreed to keep meticulous records. Attendance logs. Progress reports. Even photos. I wanted proof, not for the court, but for me. Because if my kids decided to play this game, I was going to make damn sure they played by the rules. 2 weeks later, the first attempt came. Daniel sent me an email with a PDF attached some fancy-looking letter from a community leadership initiative in New York. The words were all fluff, empowerment, outreach, innovation. Not a single concrete action listed. I didn't even open the attachment. I just replied, "Denied. Try again." That's when the tone shifted. The phone calls got louder. The texts got longer. Melissa accused me of humiliating them, of holding their future hostage. I reminded her she was welcome to ignore the will entirely and make her own future. That didn't go over well, but I wasn't cruel about it. This wasn't about punishment. It was about correction. My father once told me, if you hand a man a key to a vault, he'll open it and take everything. But if you make him build the vault himself, he'll never let it out of his sight. That's what I wanted for them, to build something, even if it was just for a year. Then came the visit. Saturday morning. I was in the garage, oiling the hinges on the side door, when I heard tires crunch on the driveway. Daniel's car. Black BMW, spotless as ever. He stepped out like he was walking into a board meeting, not his father's house. "Dad," he started, hands in his pockets, "we need to talk." "No," I said, not looking up. "You need to work." He took a step closer. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I finally met his eyes. "That's the point." He laughed short, humorless. "You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look petty. We're your children. And I'm your father. Which means it's my job to fix what I broke. And I broke you, Daniel. Both of you." His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." I wiped my hands on a rag, turned, and walked back inside. We'll see. For the next month, things were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no emails. I figured they were regrouping, looking for someone to help them bend the rules. I kept my contacts in the loop, just in case. Then, one rainy Thursday night, I got a call from Marlene, director of the shelter in Boston. She sounded uneasy. "Frank, your daughter's here." I sat forward in my chair. "Melissa?" "Yeah, but she's not here to work. She's here to film." I closed my eyes, already knowing what was coming. "She brought a camera crew," Marlene continued. "Says she's doing a documentary on charity work. Frank, she hasn't lifted a finger. She just stands around getting shots of herself handing out one box of food, then disappears into the parking lot." I didn't say a word for a few seconds. Just listened to the rain hitting the windows. "Should I send her home?" Marlene asked. "No," I said slowly. "Keep her there. And keep the cameras rolling. But this time, make sure they're pointed at her when she's not looking." Marlene's email ended at 12:03 a.m. No subject line. Just 3 video files. I opened the first one, grainy shelter footage, fluorescent lights buzzing like tired bees. Melissa walked in wearing a coat worth more than the monthly budget, heels stabbing the tile with each step. She picked up a box, glanced toward the camera, and waited. Someone said ready. She smiled, posed, set it down like it was radioactive. Then she handed the gloves to a real volunteer and walked out to fix her lipstick. 2 minutes later, she reappeared, adjusted a strand of hair, and asked clear as day, "Do we have anything that looks heavier?" I didn't even watch the rest. I called Marlene. "She's not the first to play saint for the camera," Marlene said, "but she might be the most obvious. Tomorrow," I told her, "if she shows up, put her on laundry, intake, and overnight shifts. No cameras. No angles. She'll quit," Marlene said. "Then we'll call that evidence." The next morning, Melissa's "A Day Serving the Vulnerable" hit social media, soft piano, filtered light, captions dripping with virtue. Comments fawned over her big heart. No mention of hours logged. I sent Marlene's raw footage to the trustee with one line: non-compliant. Documented. By noon, Daniel tried his own stunt, a PDF job offer from something called the Community Leadership Initiative. Title: Strategic Partnerships Director. Duties: Ecosystem Mapping and Impact Narratives. Translation: Catered lunches and emails that never move a box. I called the number at the bottom. A bright, eager voice answered. She stumbled when I asked for their IRS EIN, admitted they were in the process of becoming a nonprofit, and mentioned stipends for certain candidates. I wrote back to Daniel, "Doesn't qualify. Stipends break the rules. Try again." He called instantly. "You're making this impossible." "No," I said. "You're making it easy to say no." 3 days later, a man named Cleet from Harbor Relief in Louisiana rang me up. "Your boy's been fishing for shortcuts. Asked if we could streamline his hours for a donation. We don't sell signatures here." "I'll be there tomorrow," I told him. The warehouse smelled like diesel and wet rope. Forklifts beeped through aisles of bottled water and tarps. Cleet was all muscle and no patience. He handed me gloves and put me to work. By lunch, my shoulders burned and my shirt stuck to me like another layer of skin. "Your son's due at 3, Cleet said. Said he wants a conversation. You can watch from the catwalk." At 2:58, Daniel's SUV rolled in. He stepped out in loafers that hated gravel, carried an envelope into Cleet's glass-walled office, and pitched a deal, a year's worth of verified service in exchange for a hefty donation. Cleet didn't touch the envelope. "Hours keep people honest," he said. Daniel pressed it forward. "No one needs to know." From above, I hit record on my pocket device. When it was over, Cleet handed me the envelope. "You want to give that back, or you want me to take it to the sheriff?" "Neither," I said. "I'm keeping it for the day he lies under oath." That night in my motel room, I spread my notes, drew a map of every move I'd make next, and kept the envelope on the table where I could see it. At 9:21, the phone rang. "Mr. Donovan," a smooth voice said, "you don't know me, but you will. Meet me tomorrow. Or we move to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" "Ask your daughter in the morning." Click. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm roll in. They weren't planning to work a year. They were planning to break me. Fine. I'd let them think they had the upper hand right up until I took it back. Morning came with a gray sky and the smell of rain baked into the air. Melissa didn't call, didn't text. Instead, my neighbor Roy, who loves gossip almost as much as his lawn, stopped me at the mailbox. "Your daughter was here an hour ago," he said. "Had some slick-looking fellow with her. Suits, shiny shoes. Didn't even wave." The pieces slid together. Plan B. I drove straight to the storage facility where I kept my second set of files, bank statements, deeds, the trust documents locked in a fireproof box. The padlock was intact, but the manager said 2 people had been in my unit yesterday, flashing a duplicate key and a letter authorizing them. The letter bore my forged signature. "You didn't call the cops?" I asked. "They said it was a family matter," he shrugged. Family matter. That was their favorite phrase. Inside, my box was untouched, but the envelope from Cleet sat on the wrong shelf. Someone had opened it, then resealed it with a strip of tape that didn't match the rest. I checked, money still there, but a small black USB drive was tucked inside. No label. I took it home, plugged it into a laptop I kept offline. Videos. 3 of them. all from different angles, all showing Daniel handing over that envelope in Cleet's office. Only these were edited, cut to make it look like Cleet reached for the money first. They were going to frame him, and maybe me. By afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. You've got 48 hours to dissolve the trust, or we leak. I sent back, leak it? No reply. At 5 p.m., I drove to Melissa's place. She opened the door wearing that tight-lipped smile she used when she thought she was in control. You've made this harder than it had to be, she said. I've been accused of worse. The man from Roy's description appeared behind her. Expensive haircut, watch that cost more than my truck. He extended a hand I didn't take. Mr. Donovan, he said smoothly, I represent your children's interests. This, trust business, it's unnecessary conflict. End it, and we can all walk away friends. I stepped past Melissa into the living room, glanced at the family photos on the wall. All smiles, all without me. Friends don't forge my signature, I said. His jaw tightened. You've got nothing we can't explain away. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a second phone, a burner, and dropped it on the table. On that phone, I said, is a copy of a conversation between Daniel and a Louisiana relief manager about buying fake service hours. Plus a nice clip of your client here staging charity work for Instagram. Melissa's face drained of color. You're bluffing, he said. I shrugged. Maybe. But I've also got friends who don't mind sending things to newsrooms. He looked at Melissa. We need to talk. I walked out without waiting for their answer. Rain hit my face like cold needles. My truck's wipers fought the downpour as I drove, but my mind was already on the next move. They'd just made the mistake of showing me their hands. Now it was my turn to play mine hard. 2 days passed without a word from Melissa or her slick little lawyer friend. That silence was its own message. They were scrambling. I used the time well. The burner phone wasn't just for show. While they were busy trying to figure out how much I really knew, I met with an old contact of mine, Clay Jensen. Clay used to run digital security for a bank that folded after a scandal. He owed me a favor, and I was calling it in. We sat in the back booth of a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and fried bacon. Clay scrolled through his laptop, his glasses catching the dull glow of the screen. Frank, he said, tapping the keyboard, these people aren't amateurs. They've been moving money through shell charities for years. But here's the thing, once you know the shells, you can sink the whole operation. He turned the laptop so I could see. Account names, transaction histories, even payments labeled volunteer expenses that would sink them if they hit the wrong inbox. You want me to nuke M? He asked. Not yet, I said. We let them think they're still safe. Makes the drop hit harder. That afternoon, I drove past the family's favorite golf club. Daniel's car was parked out front. I didn't go in, I didn't need a scene. I just slid an envelope under his windshield wiper. Inside, a single photo of him with Cleet in that back office, time-stamped, and a handwritten note. Imagine this on the front page. By evening, I had my first bite. Daniel called. You think you can scare me? He barked. No, I said evenly. I think I can make your life very public. He hung up, which meant the hook was in. The next day, Melissa showed up at my door without warning. No makeup, hair a mess, holding a cheap umbrella that wasn't doing its job. Dad, she started, this is getting out of hand. Out of hand? I leaned against the doorframe. Melissa, we're just getting started. She glanced over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. They'll ruin me too. You don't understand who's involved. I stepped closer, so she had to tilt her head up to meet my eyes. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to strip me of everything I built. Her lip trembled. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she turned and walked away, heels splashing in the puddles. That was when I knew I was close to the pressure point. I didn't just want them to fail the will's condition anymore. I wanted them to beg for the chance to fulfill it. The first public strike had to look accidental, like the truth had simply slipped out. That way, no one could trace it straight back to me. Clay sent me a sanitized packet of the charity's fake transactions, just enough to get reporters sniffing. I printed them, tucked them into a plain manila envelope, and mailed it, anonymously, to a local investigative journalist with a reputation for chewing people alive. 3 days later, it hit the news. Charity fraud investigation launched, local family under scrutiny, blared across the evening broadcast. They didn't name my kids yet, but the hints were there, the dates, the donations, the unnamed beneficiaries who just happened to own lakefront property. I watched it from my recliner, coffee in hand, the screen flickering in the dark room. A slow smile crept across my face. By morning, the phone was ringing off the hook. Daniel first. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was sharp, panicked. "Me?" I said, keeping my tone mild. "I was watching the same news you were. Terrible thing, fraud. Can't imagine the kind of people who do that." He started to curse, but stopped, like he remembered I was still his father, or maybe just that he couldn't afford to make me an enemy right now. Melissa called an hour later. Her voice was thin. "Dad, reporters are calling the house. They're camped outside the gate. This is bad. Only bad if it's true," I said. Silence. That told me all I needed to know. That evening, I took a drive to the golf club again. This time, I didn't just leave an envelope. I walked inside, straight into the members' lounge, where Daniel sat with 2 board members. I leaned over his table, close enough for them to smell the coffee on my breath. "The will's condition still stands," I said. "A year in charity work. No money. No shortcuts." One of the board members chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Daniel didn't. He just stared at me, jaw tight, knowing I had him cornered in more ways than one. As I turned to leave, I dropped a final line over my shoulder. "The longer you fight me, the more this gets out." The club went quiet behind me, and in that quiet, I knew the walls were starting to close in on them. By the time winter rolled in, their polished world had cracked wide open. The charity audit was now official, and whispers had turned into printed words. Daniel's name appeared in the second article, buried halfway down, but there. Melissa's followed a week later, tied to misappropriated donations and lavish personal expenses. They'd stopped calling me. Good. I preferred it that way. Clay kept feeding me quiet updates. The state attorney's office was circling, asking for interviews. The golf club temporarily suspended Daniel's membership, not that it mattered. No one would play with him now. Melissa's social calendar went dry overnight. Invitations vanished. Then came the move they didn't expect. I had the trust's attorney file a formal notice. Due to ongoing reputational concerns and potential legal liabilities, trust distributions are further deferred until all conditions are met and public perception restored. Translation: even if they crawled into a soup kitchen tomorrow, they'd still have to wait and clean up their own mess first. I pictured them in that big, echoing house, shutters closed, pacing hallways they couldn't afford to heat much longer. For people who've lived on catered meals and 5-star trips, the slow bleed of status was worse than any prison. Still, I wasn't done. I set up a meeting neutral ground, a coffee shop downtown. When they walked in, they looked older. Harsher. Daniel's hair was thinner. Melissa's eyes had that permanent squint of someone calculating every word. "Dad," Daniel started, but I cut him off. "You're here because I'm giving you one last chance. 1 year. Real work. No board positions, no photo ops. I'll know if you cheat." Melissa's voice cracked. "You're enjoying this." I didn't deny it. "I'm enjoying watching you learn." They didn't answer. Just sat there, staring at their untouched coffee. And in that silence, I knew I'd won not just the fight, but the war for every ounce of respect they'd thrown away. I stood up, put a 10 on the table, and walked out into the cold. Behind me, they didn't follow. Spring came slow that year. I spent my mornings on the porch with black coffee, watching the street wake up, dog walkers, delivery trucks, the hum of a town that didn't care about last names. By then, the trust clock had run out. A full year since my children's glossy world had been turned inside out. And they'd failed. No charity work. No change. Just more plotting, more excuses. I met with the trustee in his office, dark wood, the faint smell of old paper and ink. He slid the final report across the desk. Conditions unmet, it read in cold, clean print. I initialed every page. The assets stayed locked. Every rental property, every account, every stock, all still under my control. They could stare at the gates all they wanted. They weren't getting in. Word must have traveled fast, because 2 days later, Daniel and Melissa showed up at my door. No appointment, no warning, just pounding fists and the brittle voices of people who finally realized the floor wasn't coming back under them. "You can't do this to us," Melissa snapped. "I did do it," I said, leaning on the doorframe. "And the best part? You did the rest yourselves." Daniel's voice dropped. "We're your children." I shook my head. "You were. Then you became strangers who thought they could buy my respect with their last name. I don't sell it." They stood there, waiting for me to blink first. I didn't. I closed the door and locked it, their muffled voices fading down the walkway. Inside, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like peace. I poured a second cup of coffee, sat back down on the porch, and let the sun warm my face. The fight was over. They'd learned, or maybe they hadn't. Either way, the inheritance would sit where it was, waiting for something they might never find. And for the first time in years, I smiled for myself. They wanted my fortune. All I gave them was the bill for their own lessons.